Hi, welcome to my video application for the 42nd St. Carlin Symposium. Today, I'll choose to present on my topic, Managing Risk. In particular, I will attempt to answer the following questions. 1. Who should bear the consequences of negligent risk-taking and why? And 2. How can healthy risk-taking be fostered in wealthy societies? But first, let us understand why this topic is really important to all of us and why it should not just be treated as an application to a conference. There are 7 billion people on this planet. Research shows that each of us make 2.5 decisions per hour of our waking lives. Working professionals, parents of young children, and vehicle drivers would probably be a bit more, but this is the global average. Now, according to economists, these decisions account for about $25,000 billion. That's 18 billion decisions in $25,000 billion of risk exposure. Now, this ratio is a lot higher in wealthy societies. The world needs a way to manage the risks associated with these decisions, be it in business, household, politics, environment, law, or war. My proposal? Who faces the consequences of negligent risk-taking? My answer? The decision maker. Be it the CEO, the fund manager, a politician, or an army general, the decision maker faces the consequences of negligent risk-taking. Secondly, how can healthy risk-taking be fostered in wealthy societies? Not just these societies, but all of us need to move on to probabilistic decision-making. In the rest of my video, I will attempt to reason and fortify my proposal. But first, let's look at how the world reacts to risk, decisions, and outcomes. In this picture, we compare decisions and outcomes. Here, my decision is, should I be drinking and driving to get home safely? Driving sober is a good decision. Driving drunk is a bad decision. Reaching home safely is a good outcome. Meeting with a serious accident is a bad outcome. Empirical evidence suggests that regularly experiencing bad outcomes may be the result of bad decisions. Regularly making good decisions increases the odds of getting good outcomes. But there is another conclusion that we all tend to miss out. If I were to drive drunk and reach home safely, I would be applauded rather than being penalized, even though it was a bad decision. Similarly, if I were to drive sober and meet with a serious accident, even though it was a good decision, I would be penalized for the bad outcome. In summary, people must be rewarded for their decisions, not their outcomes, because if their decision was good, their outcome wouldn't matter. But what happens in reality is, your bonus, your promotions, public opinion are all decided by the outcomes. Every failure penalizes them. As a result, the entire society becomes risk-averse. In effect, we can increase the willingness to take appropriate risk by always rewarding good decisions. Conversely, we can reduce any and all willingness to take appropriate risk by punishing bad outcomes. Longer-term rewards will encourage good strategic decisions, while shorter-term rewards can recognize good operational decisions. What this shows is that a decision is an action that we control. Uncertainties and events and outcomes are not something that we control. The point I'm trying to make is, the decision maker is now responsible only for the quality of the decision but not the outcome. So negligent risk-taking is systematically discouraged by penalizing bad decisions, and people are more risk-tolerant and healthy risk-taking is fostered in an organization. Moving on. This picture shows us the format of the weather forecast 10 years back, and today it includes a new section, the likelihood of an event. Businesses and commercial activities have started saving millions of dollars by the introduction of the probability in weather forecasts. This is so that they can take better decisions and cut losses. But why is this not done in everyday life throughout the world? Answer: we have not been trained to do so. I refer you to a question from your 3rd grade science exam. What is the temperature of the sun's core? The correct answer was 160 million degrees centigrade. But in reality, the answer would have been, with a 95% probability, it was 160 million degrees centigrade. With a 4.98% probability, it was 150 million degrees centigrade. And with an almost negligible probability, it was 1 million or 20,000 degrees centigrade. In essence, the objective approach is very different from reality. and does not train you to deal with uncertainties. Before putting the ideas into practice, let's look at the biggest risks which pose a threat to wealthy societies. The key topics I'll be talking about are change in business strategy and organizational structure, debt crisis economic cycles, investment risk exposures, global risks, and oil and energy resources. Together, they form the key sources of risks in today's world. Traditionally, these groups have used actuarial experts, quantitative scientists, economists, and consultants to address their problems. The challenges with the methods that these experts use are the adjusted systematic errors and empirical analysis is hardly built into the risk measure. Economists tend to avoid structural models which could capture black swan events. Consultants use a highly subjective expert-based judgment on their advice. Even though actuarial scientists come closest to capturing risks, they tend to be late adopters and leave out on shocks and extreme events. Now, looking back at our picture, how can we better manage these risks? Research shows that conflicts, be it in politics, businesses, or households, arise 85% of the time due to difference in perspectives. While the managers all have the same goals, the means to the end are likely to be assessed differently. Often, we do not start out with a shared understanding because each of us observe the immense complexity of the business from our own unique perspective. A process that includes dialogues among decision makers with their direct reports helps create shared understanding and shared responsibility for implementation. A process that includes creation of a broad range of significant different alternatives prior to the analysis helps to move the culture from adversarial to collaborative. Now, skeptics might ask, how would you aim to incorporate these proposals into daily work life? Vince Baraba's research suggests that we should start with the processes. The people and the organizational setup work in line with the process that defines the culture. Training, design, and trickle-down organizational policies can affect this cultural change. Moving on. The debt crisis. This is a present-day photo of a homeless man in Greece, a common sight of how the debt crisis affects not just wealthy societies, but common man too. In an independent study at Stanford University, we analyzed the various alternatives that Greece had to mitigate the effect of the debt crisis. The three alternatives were secession from the European Union, no action at all, or Germany helps bail out Greece. We looked at the three different stakeholders, Greece, Germany, and European Union, and we used the decision analysis method to find out what the impacts in each of these alternatives could be. Using a probabilistic model, we showed how secession from the European Union or no action could lead to disastrous consequences on the European Union. Similarly, the decision that ensured European Union's stability with the highest probability happened to be the one where Germany helps bail out Greece. Incidentally, the decision that was taken in October 2011 with Eurozone leaders along with Angela Merkel was a proposal to write off 50% of Greece's debt owed to private creditors, requiring European banks to achieve 9% capitalization to reduce the risk of contagion to other countries. Moving on to investment risks. The chart on the left shows markets during a normal regime. From historical statistical data, it is easy to conclude that the risk of negative 20% is negligible. But what most hedge fund managers and economists overlook is the chart on the right. Here, the regime during a liquidity freeze exposes assets to multifold risks. The question posed here is, how can one predict a liquidity freeze similar to the 2008 mortgage crisis? The answer is it's impossible. But part of the process of ensuring adequate valuations is to impose stringent regulations and capital requirements on whole classes of new financial instruments, such as the collateralized debt obligations which were used in the mortgage crisis. Any recent financial mechanism that appears to mask risk or increase leverage should be subject to such treatment. In effect, all the leverage and hidden risk needs to be unwound before we can reach the floor and start the way back up on a sound and sustainable basis. Quoting from Ed Hall, a risk management division expert at Stanford University, managers of risk who broaden their thinking to include uncertainty become leaders who create value along with protecting against loss. Moving on to global risks. This chart released by Harvard Business Review captures terrorism, environment, pandemics, diseases, and investment crises all on one scale. These events are not just stated bluntly, but also carefully assessed for their likelihoods. How can wealthy societies leverage such information? Their decisions to diversify risk and hedge against losses can now be reinforced by information on such events. For example, Middle East instability, which has a likelihood of 5%, can now be correlated with oil price shocks, which has a likelihood of 15%. This correlation dependence can hint at an underestimation of individual likelihoods. This way, we can confidently assess our risk and play our cards right. Moving on to oil and energy risks. The geological uncertainty and cost of exploring for and producing new reserves is no longer the biggest oil risk that we face. With the advent of new seismic and drilling technologies, this risk will further reduce uncertainty. Critical oil risk factors in the future are going to be above ground. Oil is a bargaining chip in negotiations to achieve geopolitical and sociocultural objectives. Disruption of production, refining, transportation of oil by political terrorists or Mother Nature poses the largest risk. And then there are politicians who don't believe in free market capitalism, who nationalize and tax oil assets. All these risks are not captured by distorted perceptions of possible reserves and future oil prices from naive models or outdated information. This is an actual cleansed graph shown to us by the Global Managing Director for Oil Commodities Trading in JP Morgan. He shows how he uses probabilistic upper and lower limits to restrict his quotes on selling and buying of oil commodities. Most risk managers forecast a time series of expected future prices, while he uses a range of possibilities which reflect the most up-to-date information from his research team. As of today, JP Morgan's oil commodities trading desk is one of the most profitable in the world. So how can we put this all into perspective? If the challenge is that the future is uncertain, use ranges for scenarios and data. If the challenge is that we are susceptible to cognitive illusions, develop a process to test assumptions and overcome biases. If the issues are too organizationally complex, break the problem into pieces and tackle them individually. If you think we're only judged on our performance and our outcomes, show the overall process. Investors love processes. And if you see the numbers getting really big, incorporate risk tolerance into your analysis. Risk has an unequivocal connection to the world of business and human activity. Risks should neither be denied nor avoided. Higher risk always leads to higher returns, and economies which take on higher risk have always led to higher productivity. Entrepreneurial risk-taking in these societies needs to be fostered by systematic change in the way people are rewarded. As we mentioned, it was the quality of the decision that should be judged and not the outcome. This problem goes far beyond just businesses. It entrenches a deep sense of risk aversion in society and paralyzes global competitiveness. Using broader tools and changing the processes in an organization, better risk attitudes can be fostered in people. The time to use historical data will soon be obsolete, and a new era of confidence will arise with the advent of probabilistic methods. I'd like to end my video by quoting Albert Einstein. Everything that can be counted does not necessarily count. Everything that counts cannot necessarily be counted. Thank you.